I bought those watches because I know what they are. Do you know what they are? It's not impressive to spend money. It's impressive to actually have someone that took the time and did his due diligence to buy something that doesn't scream money but screams knowledge. Hey guys, this week has been insane. Lots of new inventory, lots of new stuff coming up on the website. I didn't have the time to list anything yet, but there's a lot coming, so be patient. It's been just crazy. But today I want to talk about something, and it's how recognizable is your Rolex. A lot of people buy a Rolex and they want to show a certain level of success, and that kind of showcases the image of the brand. Everyone knows that a Rolex should look like a GMT, a Daytona sub, or some kind of a Datejust, okay, whatever color, whatever OP. So we know their shape, okay, we know what they're supposed to look like, we know their dials. Everyone is looking for the celebration, or let's say anything that's a bit funky. But it can be funky in the vintage world as well, and that's what I want to showcase today. Things that don't look like a Rolex, that if you talk about them and people are taking the time to listen to you, it's an eye opener. It's also a discussion opener. And you know what? History is tightly tied up with Rolex, okay? From military history to classic people working 25 years, 15 years in a company and getting a Rolex at the end of that 20, 25, 30 years sometimes, okay? And for me, it's very important to actually showcase and inform you that there's more to it than just a few little, classic modern pieces. And if you want to really stand out, take the time. Sometimes it's a lot of money if you're talking about really rare pieces into Rolex. But if you're looking really deeply into the vintage world, for a few $1,000s or a bit more, sub $10,000, you can get something really unique that's going to stand out and that's going to mark, your wrist as something that you've never seen before. So-called connoisseur and so-called experts in Rolex will talk about the same few models that everyone knows. That I get them all the time, but I honestly find them boring because everyone wants the same freaking thing, okay? And to me, Rolex is just so much more than that, and especially in the vintage world. And I'm gonna just show you 4 pieces here. Some of them you've seen before, one of them you haven't seen, I think. And I just want you to understand how important those watches are, not only historically, but if you want to stand out, might it be me or anything online, you have to be careful about redials or whatnot. But in general, if you find a proper original watch, you're surely gonna be the only one in the room wearing something that's worth less than a few $1,000. Let's say $4, $5, $6, $7,000, and you'll have something unique on the wrist. Basically, what I'm telling you guys, instead of showcasing your money and being super superficial about your Rolexes, dig a bit deeper. Buy a few books, read upon them, and you'll find gems out there, okay? A lot of people were freaking out about bubble backs back in the time. Today, bubble backs are pretty much disregarded in the industry. A lot of people who have been collecting those are nowadays pretty old. And honestly, a lot of those collections are going to come back to the market. And a lot of those watches are super cool. Okay, from the California dial on a bubble back to the large bubble backs to the smaller ones, there's one for every single type of wrist. And it's also interesting to see. I had one not too long ago. It was, I think, last year. I had a Cuervo Sobrinos, okay? So basically a double signed rose gold bubble back with a really rare bracelet from 1948. Amazing watch, and no one wanted to buy it, okay? This is the market today. Everyone closed the doors on those vintage watches that are extremely rare, hard to get in really good condition. And not only that, but you're losing so much by just going to the same thing that everyone wants, that basically when a guy like Mike Nouveau or any of the TikTokers that are talking about a watch and then they just make it blow up, they're gonna be like, you're gonna be like, hey, why didn't I buy that? Well, because it was always there. They exist. You just have to open your eyes towards something that is already on the market. If you're always looking at the same 2, 3, 4, 5 references and you obsess over those, okay, you're not going to be anyone else than another guy on the street that wears the same Rolex, and other guys that I meet in the same day, okay? And for me, I don't care. Like, I don't mind if you wear a Seiko, I don't mind it, whatever. But we're talking about Rolexes here that are, interesting. And a lot of people, even now, they obsess about the new Land Dweller, okay? Because the news that just came up a few days ago, the Land Dweller came up, and everyone is obsessing about it like if they reinvented the whole wheel. It's the same watch basically as 50 years ago, about 1975. I've had them in the past, the 1530, the 1630, the 17013, the 1918, which is all references in two-tone, stainless steel, automatic, solid gold. Guys, they're already there. It's the same design. It's only that today they made something that's with an open back, and that's a bit different than what you see from Rolex nowadays. It doesn't make it unique to actually wear such a watch that, yes, is unique now to the brand, but the name Land Dweller doesn't belong to the brand. They never actually made anything like that in the past, and it doesn't belong in any way to, anything of their history, okay? If you're looking at an Explorer 1016, then you're talking of a real Land Dweller. You're talking about both Explorer 1s and Explorer 2s were meant for people who reached the Everest or went really deep in caves and dug into the earth, okay? That's history. That's what Rolex is about. And if you go a bit back in time, you go and look at what they made, you'll discover amazing watches. One watch that I really want them to come back with, and it's really, really interesting, is the Oyster Prince rectangular models. I have one here. It's not ready yet for sale. I'm yet to find the proper hands from the 1920s for this watch. Otherwise, it's unpolished. It has a few service marks. But what's cool about it, the hallmark on the side is really strong. The case is pretty good. It hasn't been affected too much by the wear of time and the wear of the person who had it before. It's a fixed lug type of case. The only thing that I need to do as well is replate the crown, which seems to be pretty much in time with the whole timepiece, So in theory, that watch was a very important watch, because it had to do a lot with doctors. So they're called doctors' watches. This reference number is the 1490. It dates roughly to 1927, 28, 29, around there. It's a bit obscure because it's one of the early watches that are numbered by Rolex, but some people date them to 1927, some people date them to 1930. It's a bit obscure, but in general, okay, it's a watch that's highly important because it was part of their design. They were really sought after maybe 15, 20 years ago, even earlier on. They were worth a lot more than a Paul Newman because people would understand and would go for the history of those watches. What's important about such a watch when you're looking at them, especially online, I'd say about maybe 50 to 75% of them have wrong dials, wrong hands, or repainted dials, just really weird hands on them. And what's cool, like that's the case of mine actually, so that's why I'm waiting for the hands to make it proper and period correct. The most important part is that you do a bit of research, you look at different, I'd say, Sotheby's, Christie sales from the past. Some of those sales still have pictures from 2004, 2008, and you can see the prices going back then. Some of them are extremely rare with black dials. Those are just unobtainium right now. They're most probably in very big collections. But I'd say for something, I'd say sub $10,000 US, that's what they should be worth. Again, some people are asking crazy money on Chrono24, on eBay, or on private websites. Again, if you do have an exceptional one, and if you do have one with box and papers, and with exceptional provenance, then they're worth a lot more. But in general, what you need to look up for is to have a period correct dial. Again, might have been changed, might have been, a bit restored or cleaned in the past. That's kind of accepted after 100 years or very close to 100 years. But in general, you're looking for a dial that's 100% original. And that's what I have right here in my hands. Also, the other thing that you have to look for is if the watch has been highly polished. You want something that has all the little scratches, all the little dings and marks from the time. That's very important to showcase that the watch has not been played around with, visually. And that's, to me, that's something that screams authenticity, that screams the watch has not been messed around with in the past 10, 15, 20, 30 years maybe, or even more. For me, that's very important. If you want such watches, I think, everyone is going crazy after Cartiers that have sub-nominal quality movements, I'd say. I have a few of those in my collection. I mean, for the value that they have versus the value of a doctor's watch from Rolex, which is actually even bigger, actually hugs the whole wrist better because it's also a bit of a curved case overall, and the movement is of higher quality. Obviously, it's an older technology. They do need work in most cases, but if you're able to find one that's working, a proper service, and if you take good care of it, you're gonna have it for a very long time. But overall, I'd say it's one of the watches that right now is extremely underrated, especially for the fact that there's not many left out there. They're yet to be found, and I'm lucky enough to have one of my first ones right now on hands, and it's going to be most probably available in the next few months as soon as I have the proper hands for it. But that's one of the watches that I'd say is very important. I've talked about Eaton. This one is really funny because every time people point at it, I have the same reaction every time. Like, what is that? I'm like, well, it's an Eaton watch made by Rolex. And they automatically, as soon as they hear Eaton, as soon as they see the dial, they're like, just their eyes and everything, the whole attention just goes somewhere else. And for me, just tells me, hey, you know what? That's one watch that doesn't scream Rolex. If it was written Rolex, people would be like, oh, it's a bit interesting, whatever. But the fact that the Quarter Century Club has been around for roughly, I'd say about 40 years with, the connection of Eaton Center or the Eaton stores, with Rolex being the ones that would provide those watches to Eaton employees after 25 years, is very important. And it's a Canadian landmark in the watch history of Rolex, especially for the Canadian history. And, for one watch that's like, I'd say, so unique to a very small population in the world. Like, you cannot go to Hong Kong and say, hey, I want an Eaton watch. They don't know what the hell they're talking about, like no one, not a dealer has heard of it, or maybe old timers have, but the newer dealers, they have no idea what this is. If you go anywhere in any group of people and I'm wearing this watch, they're gonna be like, hey, what's this? It's a Rolex. And then the people that will be interested will listen to the story, will read upon it, and they'll be really eager to maybe buy one in the future or own one. It's only because people don't know about it. People have been brainwashed by all the YouTubers. I'm not a YouTuber. I own a store. I have a watch store. So for me, it's more about sharing with you what I know about the everyday business. Since I know myself and since I know what those are, maybe I'd say 15, 20 years ago, I always wanted to have one. Now that I have a few in stock, I'm just so shocked to see how people know very little about the history of the brand, and the interest has grown more and more, including in Japan. I pointed you, Japan, because you were a big consumer as a population of those really cool watches. And lately, when I traveled to Japan, most of the watches that I've seen there, and most of the bubble backs and most of those really old cool watches were totally disregarded. And I talked to people in Japan in many, many stores, and I told them, hey, I have this, I have that. They're like, nope, we're only looking for modern. That's what sells. That's what makes us money. But as you can see, even Hodinkee, who was the prime name in the industry of of promoting watches, of selling watches, especially vintage, they disregarded the vintage and went for the modern stuff. With Crown and Caliber, the history, and what happened? They hit the wall. Okay, why? Because all those people, they only saw dollar signs at the end of the tunnel, and you know what? It's just not possible. Okay, yes, there's that secondary market and the gray market of watches, But this market is very stable as long as you know what you're talking about. As long as you know that those watches exist, you open your eyes and you're gonna be like, hey man, like all those people for the past 5 years have been brainwashing me with the same brand new watches that have a couple of different colors on a dial, that have, I don't know, a dot here, a dot there, or whatever. But in the vintage world, it does mean something. It does mean a lot to have a watch that was made only for the Canadian market. There's maybe a few thousand of them. I think I'd say 7 or 8 thousand of them were made over a span of about 20 years or less than 20 years, 15, 18 years. So you can imagine there's only a few hundred of them that were given away as, the 33 millimeter Eaton Bombay case. And how many of those are left in this condition like the one I have? And the lack of interest is just staggering. I'm not complaining that this watch doesn't sell. I'm just complaining about the fact that people don't even react to those watches anymore. They don't even realize how important it is to actually have a watch that was made in less production than actually most of Daytonas out there. Or it's not even comparing to Datejusts or anything. There's like tens of millions out there. I think there's most probably like 15 to 18 million of them out on the market, because we're looking at around the 35 to 40% production rate of Datejusts. I'm just making up numbers, but I think it's around there. And if you're looking at that type of production versus something like this that was made in, less than a few tens of thousands over a span of 15 years, it's something really unique. And I'm including the Bombay cases that don't have the Eaton dials. Some of them are really insane. They have crazy gilt dials, they have gilt black, they have some kind of like rose gold writing that's insane. And obviously those are really highly regarded, but the Eaton ones, not as much, because the dealers in the States, the dealers in Hong Kong, the dealers in Europe don't find them every day. Therefore, they're not put forward by anyone because they have no money interest or no economic interest in the whole deal. So for me, it's more like, hey guys, not only me, there's a few out there for sale that are really amazing. You can find really good examples for, again, roughly around the $5,000-6,000 US. That's not a lot of money for a gold watch today. At the end of the day, you have to understand, I'm not here to bash on what other people do, what other people collect as new watches. But it took so much space into the market that it blinded everyone else. Everyone wants a Datejust. Everyone wants this. Everyone wants the first watch as a Datejust. I'm like, guys, there's so much more. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend a watch from the 50s. It's a bit more tricky. It's a bit more, finicky to wear. It's not the perfect first watch. But I say for you collectors who proclaim yourself collectors and who tell me, hey, it's my first vintage watch, and they go and buy a $50,000 red Seedweller, double red or whatever. I'm like, guys, you have no idea what you're doing. You're being sold a watch at $50,000. Yes, it's cool, but then, it's $50,000. It's a lot of money, first of all. And second of all, I'm not here to push something new. I'm here just to make you discover new things. I bought those watches because I know what they are. Do you know what they are? So if you take the time, you listen to me, and you do a bit of research, my part is just to throw you the message, to just spread the word. But your job, if you really like watches, is to do a lot of research. Take 1, 2, 3, 4 hours out there, maybe, if you can, and just change your whole ideas about this world of, I want to buy a brand new watch. There's nothing special about those. Also, what pisses me off, and that's really frustrating with Rolex, is that in the past you'd have a brand that would be very, very stable, very respectful of their customers. Nowadays, they will take a model, change it up, change a few colors, and call it a day and say, hey, we just made something new, and people go bananas for it. I don't even find it exciting because they're just making a limited production of those for 1-2 years. I go back to the Celebration because I really enjoyed the 36 millimeters. I always wanted to have one, but to pay I don't know, $12,000 Canadian, or roughly around $9,000-10,000 US premium to have an Oyster Perpetual just because it has a couple of bubbles on the dial. Is it cool? Yeah, but it's not that cool, you know? It's a fuck you to the industry in a way because they kind of made something different, but it's not that different to say, hey, you know, it's a different watch. They haven't put innovation at all in what they did. And for me, it's frustrating to see that. I want you guys to understand overall that Watches and Wonders has grown in popularity tremendously in the past 7-8 years. And what people are just exhausting right now is that immense expectations from all the brands, okay? And the fact that everyone just wants to know what's coming up next, okay? For the past 75 years of Rolex, okay, we're in 2025. Since 1950, 1951, 52, 53, it was the years of innovation with Rolex, okay? With their first divers, the Turnograph, the Submariners, the GMT, the Explorers of this world, different, you know, testings and trials of new designs, of going in depth, and you know, even with their chronographs, their pre-Daytonas and everything. It was really interesting. Today they just have all the same movements as they did before, but at least before they would have a model, well, maybe not the first few GMTs like the 6542, they didn't have them for 10 years, but any subsequent model like the 1016, the 5512, 5513, 1680, which came in later, a decade later after most of those models. What happened is that they basically kept those models for the 1016. I think they came up with them, I think, in 1960, 1961. They stopped them in 1989, the last year. 5512, it's roughly the same, almost the same lifespan. 5513 came just a bit later, but they discontinued them as well in 1989. So, you know, there was that presence of the company. They basically made a good product that would last years and years and years to come. And what was cool about the brand is that very little people know about that. But a 1016 might have 4 or 5 or 6 different iterations of the same movement, okay? The first ones would have a different movement from the last era. Okay, they would start with the 1530, no date, obviously, it's not a 1535, and then they would go from the butterfly movement to the 1570, and so on and so forth, and then you go to from the 1973, 74, when they added the hack system, so a little arm that just blocks the seconds and stops the whole watch, to everything else, you know. So there were a lot of background updates, improvements, updates in the crown, updates in every single thing they were doing, but they were very subtle. Okay, the company was very, very subtle about it. Today, everything has to be bold. You need to see that you're wearing a Rolex. I can spot a Rolex from 30, 50, 100 meters away, and it just is not what I want when I'm wearing a watch. I want something that's subtle, something that doesn't necessarily appeal to most people, okay? If I'm wearing a tank like today, that's the new model. It's a 2024, I believe, and it's a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, who actually let me have it for this video, and it's super cool. I enjoy this watch, and you know, for most people who don't know Cartier, now people are a bit more up to date, but for a while this was just the random watch that people wouldn't know about. And that's why Rolex has become an icon of the whole industry, but at the same time, they're also damaging their history, okay? They're just not going and looking behind and to what the past was with their company. That's why for me, it's extremely important for you to understand that watches are not just the new toy that you get, and the next year it's the new toy, you know, and the next year it's a new toy. But all those watches, they're not gonna grow as historic watches. They haven't done anything new. They're just jewelry pieces today. You have to understand that Rolex has basically become the iPhone of watches. Now you're always looking for the best new toy that came up, and 2 years later you just forget about it. You're not wearing it. Most of the people that I've seen buying those, they just put them in the box or put them in the safe, and treat them as investments, which is not the purpose of those watches. They were meant to be worn to begin with. What I did is that I did a pretty big interlude, but I want to go with the next watch that's still on the website, and that just shocks me, okay? There's a very, very few chances of seeing another one, even for me who buys, roughly around 1,000 watches a year, to actually see another one of those in the future. It's almost like a basket wave, so it's basically little squares one by one. I have it on the website. It's very impressive how cool those watches are. And again, this is a manual wound. I think it's a really basic caliber from the bubble back. I don't know exactly the reference of the caliber, but overall this watch is pretty intact, pretty original. It does still have the original crown, even though the plating on the crown or the stainless steel cap has worn off. I have those crowns in stock, but I left it there. The case is pretty good for the age. It has a bit of wear, but it's normal after over, 70 years, And this is something that for me talks history, talks uniqueness. If I see someone wearing something like this, kudos to you. I have the utmost respect. You have taste, you have a lot of distinction, and I do respect people that actually collect true vintage watches that are worthwhile to collect. It's not impressive to spend money. It's impressive to actually have someone that took the time and did his due diligence to buy something that doesn't scream money but screams knowledge, okay? And that's what those watches are screaming. The last one, but not the least, is the UK made case Denison Rolex with the tuxedo dial. It's extremely rare. It's a no date. What else can you want from such a watch other than, perfection after so many years? Obviously, it's a Denison case, so very few of those watches were ever made, and it's clearly written in the back Denison for Rolex, which means a lot. It shows the provenance. It shows how cool and rare this watch is. It does have the same type of dial, or the same dial as the 34mm case would have, but this one is more of a dressy watch. It's literally a tuxedo. I would see myself at a wedding wearing this watch. And honestly, guys, if you don't buy it and if you don't wake up on this watch, I'm gonna end up keeping it for myself, and you're never gonna see it again for another 20-25 years on the market. So if you're not listening to me, you're gonna lose it, and I'm maybe gonna sell it when I retire, and it's gonna end up at Sotheby's or Christie's or something, because it's such a rare watch. I just can't believe that people don't click with those again. And it's not only me. I see a lot of stuff out there that's really interesting, that's really unique, and a lot of people are just going for the price. Again, I talked about that in the past. They're looking at a sub, they're looking at the vintage watch. They want the cheapest Datejust possible. They want the cheapest Oyster Perpetual possible. They want the cheapest 6694, which is the entry level of Rolexes, and people are just going nuts for those little watches, but they want the cheapest and the poorest condition watch they can find because their budget is very small. And when you get into those vintage watches, you cannot think like that. I talked about it in the past. Spend $500, $1,000 more for a similar, or for the same model. You're maybe gonna have a unique dial. At least, even if the case is really bad, you have at least a unique dial on your watch, and it's gonna stand out from the crowd. Kudos to someone who just sold me today a caliber 710 manual wound Rolex, also from the 1950s, and this one is also very cool. It's a 34mm with a really, really nice dial. I'll have it on the website very soon. Those watches are just so rare to find right now, and I'm lucky enough to have a huge and respectful, crowd around me that helped me acquire all those watches. I know a lot of dealers, a lot of people ask me, how do you get your watches? Well, look, you know what? Before being public, before doing the videos, I developed a huge connection from Cuba to Denmark to Japan to locally, dominating in a way the local market. Everyone knows about me. I'm here to stay. I'm here to do a good job. And eventually they're going to come to me and offer me stuff. That's what I call dominating, and not dominating like, hey, like I want to have control over it. No, no, no. I'm talking about respect. I'm talking about the fact that people sometimes might take years to come to you. And it humbles me when someone actually sells me something because I did something respectful and I did a really good transaction with someone who actually brings me someone new to the store and actually encourages me to actually support what I'm doing, to support the business and to support me, and that gives me a lot of trust. And that's what I call like, hey, you know what, it's not about ego. I don't care about ego. I don't care about any of that. I just care about the fact that, hey, you know what, all of those things that I did in the past are actually paying off, and I'm able to actually offer you guys really cool watches, really unique pieces, and I'm curating them. A lot of the pieces are not making it to the website. A lot of those pieces are dismantled. They're really poor condition, and I'm not gonna be lowering my standards of originality, of saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna start mixing and matching things around just to make it right. There's no point into that. I have to remain true to myself, and there's quite a few dealers out there that are doing the same thing, and I respect them. I have a lot of respect for people that are doing the best they can to support this industry correctly. And I think you can do it by also investing yourself and investing time into more knowledge about those watches. Now I'm talking about Rolex, but there's so much more out there. That's one of the biggest brands, and even there, people don't even look at the right things, I find, as I spoke today. But you have to think about it, there are over 3,000 companies that are making watches or that have made watches in the past in Switzerland, okay? And some minor brands, some people that made prototypes, so many other things that we don't even know about, that never even surfaced in the world. I hope you like the video, guys. I don't want to rant. I just want you guys to be as happy as possible. Doing what you're doing best is to read upon watches. And thank you very much for the support of the people that came in this week. They watched the videos. They came from really far away, as far away as the lower states in the US, and people in Newfoundland, people from Vancouver who actually came just to say, hey, I love your videos and I just enjoy it. Also, I have someone who is living through hard times. I just bought a lot of parts from him. He did support me by giving me the first dibs at a lot of parts and books and memorabilia. So thank you. It was really touching for me to actually have you on the phone this week. You know who you are, and I have a lot of respect for you, and thank you very much for the support. It just means everything for me, okay, to actually have people like that who trust me, who actually give me a chance to actually do business with them, and vice versa. I'm there to help if, in this case, it helps. And I hope you guys as well have enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. I wish you a really good week, and I'll see you next time.